You check your bank balance twice before you believe it, not because it's low, because it isn't. $4,180. No decline at the grocery store last week. Rent cleared without the countdown in your head. You climbed out of the hole. Now you're standing in the quiet after, wondering what that number is actually supposed to do for you. Then a coworker says one sentence that turns the question into a different question entirely. The balance doesn't move. That's the strange part. You expected it to feel like winning, but it just sits there in the app, unchanged, while you scroll to email and back, like it might have grown in the 10 seconds you looked away. It hasn't. It won't. Not sitting where it is. You've heard the word inflation so many times it's lost its shape. One of those words that means something is wrong without telling you what. You find out what it actually costs you on a Tuesday, in the break room, while a coworker peels the lid off her yogurt and mentions, the way people mention things that quietly change their life, that she just bumped her retirement contribution to 11%. 11. You repeat it like she'd told you she ran a marathon barefoot. The company matches up to 6. She'd only been putting in 3 for years. Free money every paycheck, and she'd left most of it on the table without knowing. You don't say anything. You do the math badly, standing by the fridge, your lunch going cold. Free money you didn't take. Years of it, gone. That night you pull up your own retirement account for the first time since you opened it, 3 years ago, on autopilot, at 4%. Because that's the number the enrollment form defaulted to, and you were too busy surviving to change it. You're not at 4% because you decided 4 was right. You're at 4% because a form decided for you. You bump it to 6. Your thumb hovers over the button longer than the decision deserves. 6% doesn't feel like anything tonight. No parade, just a number changing quietly, which is what most real progress looks like while it's happening. You could stop there. Most people do. But you keep going, and you find the yearly limit the government sets on how much can go in before your regular paycheck even touches it. You're nowhere close to that ceiling. Almost nobody is. But knowing it exists changes how you see the floor you've been standing on for 3 years. You open the second account you'd forgotten, a tax-advantaged retirement fund you started 18 months ago with $200 and never touched again, like a gym membership you feel guilty about but can't cancel. You move $150 into it. The number isn't the point tonight. The point is the account stops being a graveyard and starts being a place where things happen. Then you remember the health plan you picked at open enrollment because it had the lowest number next to it, the way you pick the cheapest item on a menu when you're not sure what you're allowed to want. That plan came with a savings account for medical costs, one you never funded. This year you're allowed to put in over $4,000, and unlike almost every other account you own, this one doesn't make you choose between saving on taxes now or later. You get both, as long as it goes towards staying alive. You don't finish all of it tonight. You do the parts that felt possible. Money that used to just sit there, waiting to be spent or forgotten, now has somewhere specific to go before you ever get the chance to touch it. You close the laptop expecting relief and instead find something quieter underneath it, something the accounts didn't fix. You sleep fine that night, which is more than you can say for most nights this year. That's a different problem, one that was sitting under all the good news the whole time, waiting its turn. You fall asleep fast enough, exhaustion does that for you, but you wake up most nights around 3:40, on the same 10-year-old mattress that dips in the middle like a canoe, and you lie there doing math you don't want to do until the alarm agrees it's time to get up. You'd stopped calling it a problem until a coworker, rubbing his eyes over his second coffee, jokes that running on 5 hours of sleep is basically the same as being drunk at your desk. He laughs. You don't, because you already did that math this morning at 3:40, and you know exactly how many hours you got. You think about the deadline you agreed to yesterday that you knew you couldn't hit, because your brain had nothing left to push back with. You'd been calling these personality problems. They might just be a mattress problem. That night you buy the mattress you've been putting off for 2 years, not because you couldn't afford it, but because the price felt reserved for people with their life more figured out than you. You buy it anyway, along with blackout curtains, because the streetlight outside your window has been arguing with your sleep since you moved in, and you never once thought to just end the argument. It arrives Thursday. You sleep 9 hours without meaning to, and wake up checking the clock twice, the way you checked your balance twice. Like good news needs a second look before you're allowed to trust it. The doctor's appointment moves the same way. You've had a spot on your shoulder for 8 months you've been not looking at on purpose. You finally book it, and instead of the long wait a coworker mentioned she went through at a public clinic, you're seen in 6 days through the plan at work. It's nothing. The doctor says so in about 90 seconds, and you almost laugh from the relief of it. Walking out, you notice you paid for that speed. You paid for not carrying 8 more months of worry in your shoulder. This is where the health account you funded last week stops being an abstract number and starts being the thing that covers the copay without you feeling it, because you'd already decided your body was worth budgeting for. You joined the gym you'd been meaning to join too, not the cheap one with the broken equipment, the one with real machines and a trainer who checks in. You almost talk yourself out of it in the parking lot. Then you think about how many mornings you've already talked yourself out of things for free, and you go in anyway. You're not paying for the workout, you're paying for the version of you that actually shows up. Nobody throws a party for any of this. There's no finish line, just a mattress, a curtain, an appointment kept instead of avoided, a membership you almost didn't sign. Small decisions nobody's watching you make, but a few weeks in, you notice you're not doing math at 340 anymore, and with your head clear, you start noticing how much of the rest of your life still looks like it was furnished by someone who couldn't afford to care. You notice it on a video call, of all things, in that small square of yourself in the corner of the screen you usually ignore. A client is talking about renewing a contract, and your eyes drift to your own reflection instead. You watch yourself slump lower with every sentence, shoulders curling like the chair is slowly swallowing you. It's the same folding chair from your first apartment. $40, 4 years ago, and you never once thought of it as a decision. It was just a chair. Chairs don't matter. Except you catch yourself doing it again the next day, one hand pressed to your lower back like you're 40 years older than you are. A friend 2 floors up mentions she finally caved and bought a real office chair, well over $1,000, the kind everyone jokes about until their back starts talking. I thought it was insane, she says. Then I sat in it for a week and realized my old chair was basically injuring me for free. You look at the price twice. It's more than you've ever spent on a single piece of furniture. But you think about the mattress still doing its quiet work every night, and you buy the chair. Adjustable. Built for a spine that has to last another 40 years of work. When you sit in it, nothing happens. No fireworks. Just your back held the way it's supposed to be held, and the slow realization of how much tension you'd stop noticing, the way you stop noticing a smell you live inside of. The shirt happens differently. You're getting ready for an internal interview, and the dress shirt you bought off the rack 2 years ago hangs on you wrong. Too loose at the waist, sleeves half an inch too long, collar gaping just enough that you keep touching it without meaning to. A coworker who always looks put together, on roughly your salary, catches you fidgeting in the elevator and tells you to just get it tailored. $20, 2 blocks away, changes everything. You laugh it off, then realize you keep touching your collar instead of thinking about your answers. After work you walk the 2 blocks. The tailor takes it in, $22, 12 minutes of your life. You put it back on and stand up straighter without deciding to. The same way the chair made your spine sit right without asking permission. It isn't the shirt, it's that for the first time in the interview, you're not managing your clothes. You're just answering the question. You fix the loose door handle. You replace the bulb that's flickered for 6 months. None of it is impressive alone, but you're sitting differently now, moving through your own life like it was actually built for you. It's a Sunday night, and you're on your knees in the bathroom, scrubbing grout with a repurposed toothbrush, 3 hours into a cleaning spiral that started with just the kitchen. You think about your neighbor, who mentioned she has someone come every other week, and how you'd quietly judged her for it, the way you judge things you secretly want. Paying someone to clean your own apartment felt like admitting you couldn't handle your own life. You do a piece of math you've never actually done. You pull up your salary, divide it by the hours you actually work in a year, and land on a number, roughly $30 an hour. That's what an hour of you is worth on paper. $90 buys 2 hours every other week, and buys back 3 hours you'd otherwise spend on grout at 11 at night. It doesn't fully pencil out on the math alone, but you're not just buying the 2 hours. You're buying not thinking about the bathroom all week, not resenting your Sunday. You book it. It feels indulgent for about 4 days. Then the following Sunday you're at the kitchen table, coffee still hot, actually reading instead of resenting a list, and the guilt just quietly stops showing up. A relative's husband mentions at a cookout that he pays for a coach who reviews his sales calls and tells him exactly where he's losing deals. Sounds expensive, you say. It was, he says, until it got him a promotion in 4 months instead of 2 years of guessing. You'd been circling something similar, a course on the tools everyone at your job keeps mentioning like you're supposed to already know them. You'd bookmarked it months ago. You buy it the same week you book the cleaner, and it feels like the same decision wearing 2 different outfits. Not spending. Trading money for hours for a head start you'd otherwise pay for anyway, one way or another. The test comes 2 weeks later. Driving past a dealership where a sleek sports car sits under the lights like it knows exactly what it's doing to people who slow down to look. You do slow down. You always do. You picture yourself in it at a red light, someone glancing over, But for the first time, the picture doesn't finish itself the way it used to. You think about the $30 math, about what actually buys back an hour versus what just borrows attention for a red light's worth of time. The car doesn't clean your bathroom. It doesn't teach you a skill. You keep driving. You're not richer than an hour ago, but the questions you're asking about money have changed shape. You're no longer asking what you can afford. You're asking what's actually worth being yours. A friend gets married at a vineyard a few hours away, and you almost don't go. A few months ago, it would have been a math problem instead of a memory. You go anyway. You stand in the back during the ceremony because you got there late, untangling a rideshare. None of it is efficient or optimized. It's just good. You fly home sunburned, out several $100s, and happier than you've been in longer than you can date. On that flight, phone in airplane mode, nothing to do but think. You notice something has shifted since the mattress, since the chair, since the cleaner and the course. You're not chasing the feeling of having money anymore. You're spending it on things that are still there a year later, not in a drawer, but in you. Which is why, walking through the airport, you stop at a watch counter almost by accident, and don't buy the one you've been eyeing for 2 years. You look at it for a long minute, then keep walking. Not because you can't afford it, but because you finally understand the difference between wearing evidence and wearing a hope. A colleague carries a bag that costs more than most people's cars. You used to assume she was born into it. She wasn't. She told you once, half joking, that she bought it the year she made partner, not to announce she'd arrived, but because she already had, and the bag was just catching up to the truth. Object first is a costume. Object last is a receipt. You start looking some nights at listings you have no business looking at yet. A modest waterfront place, absurd by most standards. You're not buying one, not this year, not next year. But you're not just fantasizing anymore either. You're pricing a future instead of dreaming one. The pottery class is smaller and matters just as much, something you'd wanted to try since college, and always filed under not now. Your first bowl comes out lopsided, and you laugh at it instead of at yourself. For 2 hours every week, nobody needs anything from you. You're not optimizing, you're just a person with clay on your hands, and it turns out that's worth something too. You think about the version of you a year ago, doing math at 3:40 in the morning on a mattress that dipped in the middle, who would have called a wedding trip reckless. That version wasn't wrong to be careful. That version was surviving. But surviving was never supposed to be the whole plan. You land home late, tired in the good way, and set your phone on the nightstand next to a bed that finally lets you sleep. You don't check your balance before you fall asleep. For the first time in longer than you can remember, you don't need to know the number to know you're okay. You wake up Monday and check the account out of habit, not fear. It's higher than it was a year ago, even after the mattress, the chair, the cleaner, the course, the flight. Not because you got lucky, because for the first time, every dollar had a job before it had a chance to disappear. 6% instead of 4%. A funded account instead of an empty one. A body budgeted for instead of ignored. But you're still lying there a minute longer than you need to, staring at the ceiling instead of getting up. You know the contribution rate. You know the hourly math. You know a tailored shirt from a fantasy watch. None of it tells you what tomorrow actually costs. The version where you're still tired, still behind on something, still not sure you're doing this right. You get up anyway. You make the coffee. You sit in the chair that finally holds you the way it's supposed to. And somewhere between the mattress and the waterfront listing you're not ready for yet, you're left with the only math nobody hands you a formula for. What a good life is actually going to require of you.